is going. Okay. Welcome back to Amateur Hour. I'm doing this again because I want to. I am going to continue reading wherever we left off, if I can find it. Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. I'm going to drink first, Ed. Oh my gosh. It's hot today. It's a good hot. There goes my lid. I miss reading. I want to read too. I think my phone is heavier than this shoe. Let me read to you, he says. Then he spends the entire first 5 minutes trying to adjust the stupid thing. Oh my gosh. What if I put it in the shoe? What if I put it in the shoe? If I put it in the shoe. You want to see the shoe? That's the shoe. That's my tripod. That's my tripod as I try hard. Look at that. Look at that. There we go. Sweet. Alright. Brandon Sanderson's The Way of Kings. Guess who didn't use a bookmark last time? Freaking whoops. Let's see. Well, I remember Zeth. He was on a murder spree. And I flipped to this page, so I think this was the last one that was opened. So if there's a little bit of overlap, yeah, as long as I'm not skipping anything, that's the important bit. Actually, no. I bet the sound's fine. Unless it's not. What if the sound is bad while it's in the shoe? Gosh dang, I didn't think of that. Here. How's that? Stay, phone. Okay. Zeth lowered his shard blade. Standing among the cindered corpses, here in Alethkar, Menalton spoke of the legends of mankind's hard-won victory over the Voidbringers. But when weapons created to fight nightmares were turned against common soldiers, the lives of men became cheap things indeed. Zeth turned and continued on his way, slippered feet falling on the soft red rug. The shard blade, as always, glistening silver and clean. When one killed with a blade, there was no blood. That seemed like a sign. The shard blade was just a tool. It could not be blamed for the murders. The door at the end of the hallway burst open. Zeth froze. A small group of soldiers rushed out. Oh, yeah, okay, we have read this part. All right. So I think... because he was using his magic to, shift gravity for specific things or people. You know, you could just make it so that he could just fall down a hallway at the speed of gravity. That was his magic. And then his sword cut like a lightsaber, but it also burned people's eyes out and I guess sucked their soul out or something. I forget. It's been forever since I read this. And, so let me try to get back to where we were. Here we are. Okay. Okay. So, yeah. We were right before that. Okay, so. Zeth turned the corner on his way to slipper feet. All right. Another figure stepped from the king's quarters. He wore glistening blue armor made of smoothly interlocking plate. Unlike common plate armor, however, this armor had no leather or mail visible at the joints. Just smaller plates, fitting together with intricate precision. The armor was beautiful. The blue inlaid with golden bands around the edges of each piece of plate. The helm ornamented with 3 waves of small horde-like wings. Shard plate, the customary complement to a shard blade. The newcomer carried a sword as well, an enormous shard blade, 6 feet long, with a design along the blade like burning flames. A weapon of silvery metal that gleamed and almost seemed to glow. A weapon designed to slay dark gods, a larger counterpart to the one that Zeth carried. Zeth hesitated. He did not recognize the armor. He had not been warned that he would be set at this task, and hadn't been given proper time to memorize the various suits of plate or blades owned by the Alethi. Or Alethi? I'm going to say Alethi. Somebody can correct me. But a shard-bearer would have to be dealt with before he chased the king. He could not leave such a foe behind. Besides, perhaps a shard-bearer could defeat him, kill him, and end his miserable life. His lashings wouldn't work directly on somebody in shard plate, and the armor would enhance the man, strengthen him. Szeth's armor would not allow him to betray his mission or seek death, but if that death occurred, he would welcome it. The shard-bearer struck, and Szeth lashed himself to the side of the hallway, leaping with a twist and landing on the wall. He danced backward, blade held at the ready. The shard-bearer fell into an aggressive posture, using one of the sword play stances favored here in the East. He moved far more nimbly than one would expect for a man in such bulky armor. Shardplate was special, as ancient and magical as the blades it complemented. The shard-bearer struck. Szeth skipped to the side, lashed himself to the ceiling as the shard-bearer's blade sliced into the wall. Feeling a thrill at the contest, Szeth dashed forward and attacked downward with an overhand blow, trying to hit the shard-bearer's helm. The man ducked, going down on one knee, letting Szeth's blade cleave empty air. Szeth leaped backward as the shard-bearer swung upward with his blade, slicing into the ceiling. Szeth didn't own a set of plate himself, and didn't care to. His lashings interfered with the gemstones that powered shard plate, and he had to choose one or the other. As the shard-bearer turned, Szeth sprinted forward across the ceiling, and as expected, the shard-bearer swung again, and Szeth leapt to his side, rolling. He came up from his roll and flipped, lashing himself to the floor again. He spun to land on the ground behind the shard-bearer. He slammed his blade on into his opponent's open back. Unfortunately, there was one major advantage. Plate offered. It could block a shard blade. Szeth's weapon hit solidly, causing a web of glowing lines to spread out across the back of the armor. And Starlight began to leak free from them. Shardplate didn't dent or bend like common metal. Szeth would have to hit the shard-bearer in the same location at least once more to break through. Szeth danced out of range as the shard-bearer swung in anger, trying to cut at Szeth's knees. I look at the screen and then I lose my spot. The tempest within Szeth gave him many advantages, including the ability to quickly recover from small wounds, but it would not restore limbs killed by a shard blade. He rounded the shard-bearer, then picked a moment and dashed forward. The shard-bearer swung again, but Szeth briefly lashed himself to the ceiling for lift. He shot into the air, cresting over the swing, then immediately lashed himself back to the floor. He struck as he landed, but the shard-bearer recovered quickly and executed a perfect follow-through stroke, coming within a finger of hitting Szeth. The man was dangerously skilled with that blade. Many shard-bearers depended too much on the power of their weapon and armor. This man was different. Szeth jumped to the wall, struck at the shard-bearer with quick, terse attacks, like a snapping eel. The shard-bearer fended him off with wide, sweeping counters. His blade length kept Szeth at bay. This is taking too long, Szeth thought. If the king slipped away into hiding, Szeth would fail in his mission no matter how many people he killed. He ducked in for another strike. Hello, loud airplane. But the shard-bearer forced him back. Each second this fight lasted was another for the king's escape. It was time to be reckless. Szeth launched into the air, lashing himself to the other end of the hallway and falling feet first toward his adversary. The shard-bearer did not hesitate to swing, but Szeth lashed himself down at an angle, dropping immediately. The shard blade swished through the air above him. He landed in a crouch, using his momentum to throw himself forward, and swung at the shard-bearer's side, where the plate had cracked. He hit with a powerful blow. That piece of the plate... There's a big airplane up there. The plate cracked. He hit with a powerful blow. That piece of the plate shattered, bits of molten metal streaking away. The shard-bearer grunted, dropping to one knee, raising a hand to his side. Szeth raised a foot to the man's side and shoved him backward with a Stormlight-enhanced kick. The heavy shard-bearer crashed into the door of the king's quarters, smashing it and falling partway into the room beyond. Szeth left him, ducking instead through the doorway to the right, following the way the king had gone. The hallway here had the same red carpet and stormlight lamps on the walls. It gave Szeth a chance to recharge the tempest within. Energy blazed within him, and he sped up. If he could get far enough ahead, he could deal with the king, then turn back to fight off the shard-bearer. It would not be easy. A full lashing on a doorway wouldn't stop a shard-bearer, and that plate would let the man run supernaturally fast. Szeth glanced over his shoulder. The shard-bearer wasn't following. The man sat up in his armor, looking dazed. Szeth could just barely see him sitting in the doorway, surrounded by broken bits of wood. Perhaps Szeth had wounded him more than he had thought. Or maybe... Szeth froze. He thought of the ducked head of the man who'd been rushed out, face obscured. The shard-bearer still wasn't following. He was so skilled. It was said that few men could rival Gavilar Kholin's swordsmanship. Could it be? Szeth turned and dashed back, trusting his instincts, and as soon as the shard-bearer saw him, he climbed to his feet with alacrity. Szeth ran faster. What was the safest place for your king? In the hands of some guards, fleeing, or protected in a suit of shard plate, left behind, dismissed, as a bodyguard? Clever, Szeth thought, as the formerly sluggish shard-bearer fell into another battle stance. Szeth attacked with renewed vigor, swinging his blade in a flurry of strikes. The shard-bearer, the king, aggressively struck out with broad, sweeping blows. Szeth pulled away from one of these, feeling the wind of the weapon passing just inches before him. He timed his next move, then dashed forward, ducking underneath the king's follow-through. The king, expecting another strike at his side, twisting with his arm, held protectively to block the hole in his plate. That gave Szeth the room to run past him and into the king's chambers. The king spun around to follow, but Szeth ran through the lavishly furnished chamber, flinging out his hand. Touching pieces of furniture he passed, he infused them with stormlight. Lashing them to a point behind the king, the furniture tumbled as if the room had been turned on its side. Couches, chairs, and tables dropping toward the surprised king. Gavilar made the mistake of chopping at them with his shard blade. The weapon easily sheared through the large couch, but the pieces still crashed into him, making him stumble. A footstool hit him next, throwing him to the ground. Gavilar rolled out of the way of the furniture and charged forward, plate leaking streams of light from the cracked sections. Szeth gathered himself, then leaped into the air, lashing himself backward and to the right as the king arrived. He zipped out of the way of the king's blow, then, lashing himself forward with 2 basic lashings in a row. Stormlight flashed out of him, clothing freezing as he was pulled toward the king at twice the speed of a normal fall. The king's posture indicated surprise, as Szeth lurched in midair, then spun toward him, swinging. He slammed his blade into the king's helm, then immediately lashed himself to the ceiling and fell upward, slamming into the stone roof above. He had lashed himself in too many directions, too quickly, and his body had lost track, making it difficult to land gracefully. He stumbled back to his feet. Below, the king stepped back, trying to get into position to swing up at Szeth. The man's helm was cracked, leaking stormlight, and he stood protectively, defending the side of the broken plate. The king used a one-handed swing, reaching for the ceiling. Szeth immediately lashed himself downward, judging that the king's attack would leave him unable to get his sword back in time. Szeth underestimated his opponent. The king stepped into Szeth's attack, trusting his helm to absorb the blow, just as Szeth hit the helm a second time, shattering it. Gavilar punched with his offhand, slamming his gauntleted fist into Szeth's face. Blinding light flashed in Szeth's eyes, as a counterpoint to the sudden agony that crashed across his face. Everything blurred, his vision fading. Pain. So much pain. He screamed, stormlight leaving him in a rush, and he slammed back into something hard. The balcony doors, more pain broke. The balcony doors, period. More pain broke out across his shoulders, as if someone had stabbed him with 100 daggers. And he hit the ground and rolled to a stop, muscles trembling. The blow would have killed an ordinary man. No time for pain. No time for pain. No time for pain. He blinked, shaking his head, and the world blurry and dark. Was he blind? No, it was dark outside. He was on the wooden balcony. The force of the blow had thrown him through the doors. Something was thumping. Heavy footfalls. The shard-bearer. Szeth stumbled to his feet. Vision swimming, blood streamed from the side of his face, and stormlight rose from his skin, blinding his left eye. The light. It would heal him if it could. His jaw felt unhinged. Broken? He dropped a shard blade. A lumbering shadow moved in front of him. The shard-bearer's armor had leaked enough stormlight that the king was having trouble walking. But he was coming. Szeth screamed, kneeling and fusing stormlight into the wooden balcony, lashing it downward. The air frosted around him. The tempest roared, traveling down his arms into the wood. He lashed it downward, and then did it again. He lashed a fourth time as Gavilar stepped onto the balcony. It lurched under the weight, the wood cracking and straining. The shard-bearer hesitated. Szeth lashed the balcony downward a fifth time. The balcony's supports shattered, and the entire structure broke free from the building. Szeth screamed through a broken jaw and used his final bit of stormlight to lash himself to the side of the building. He fell to the side, passing the shocked shard-bearer, then hit the wall and rolled. The balcony dropped away. The king looking up with shock as he lost his footing. The fall was brief. In the moonlight, Szeth watched solemnly. Vision still fuzzy, blinded in one eye, as the structure crashed to the stone ground below. The wall of the palace trembled, and the crash of broken wood echoed from the nearby buildings. Still, lying on the side of the wall, Szeth groaned, climbing to his feet. He felt weak. He'd used up his stormlight too quickly. Straining his body, he stumbled down the side of the building, approaching the wreckage, barely able to remain standing. The king was still moving. Shard plate would protect a man from such a fall, but a large length of bloodied wood stuck up through Gavilar's side, piercing him where Szeth had broken the plate earlier. Szeth knelt down, inspected the man's pain-racked face. Strong features, square chin, black beard flecked with white, striking pale green eyes. Gavilar Khlin. "I expected you to come," the king said between gasps. Szeth reached underneath the front of the man's breastplate, tapping the straps there. They unfastened, and he pulled the front of the breastplate free, exposing the gemstones on its interior. 2 had been cracked and burned out. 3 still glowed. Numb, Szeth breathed in sharply, absorbing the light. The storm began to rage again. More light rose from the side of his face, repairing his damaged skin and bones. The pain was still great. Stormlight healing was far from instantaneous. It would be hours before he recovered. The king coughed. "You can tell, Thydekar, that he is too late." "I don't know who that is," Szeth said, standing, his words slurring from his broken jaw. He held his hand to the side, re-summoning his shard blade. The king frowned. "Then who? Rastaris? Sadeas? I never thought that." "My masters are the Pershendi," Szeth said. 10 heartbeats passed, and his blade dropped into his hands, wet with condensation. "The Pershendi? That makes no sense." Gavilar coughed, and quivering, reaching toward his chest and fumbling at a pocket. He pulled out a small, crystalline sphere tied to a chain. "You must take this. They must not get it." He seemed dazed. Tell my brother. He must find the most important words a man can say." Gavilar fell still. Szeth hesitated, then knelt down and took the sphere. It was odd, unlike any he had ever seen before. Though it was completely dark, it seemed to glow somehow, with a light that was black. "The Pershendi," Gavilar had said. "That makes no sense." "Nothing makes sense anymore," Szeth whispered, tucking the strange sphere away. "It's all unraveling. I'm sorry, King of the Alethi. I doubt that you care. Not anymore, at least." He stood up. "At least you won't have to watch the world ending with the rest of us." Beside the king's body, his shard blade materialized from mist, clattering to the stones now that its master was dead. It was worth a fortune. Kingdoms had fallen as men vied to possess a single shard blade. Shouts of alarm came from inside the palace. Szeth needed to go, but... "Tell my brother." To Szeth's people, a dying request was a sacred thing. He took the king's hand, dipping it in the man's own blood, then used it to scrawl on the wood. "Brother, you must find the most important words a man can say." With that, Szeth escaped into the night. He left the king's shard blade. He had no use for it. The blade Szeth already carried was curse enough. Ooh! That was the end of that was that. That was very fun. Heading into part 1, Above Silence. Galadin and Shallan. Chapter 1. Storm Blessed. "You've killed me. Bastards, you've killed me. While the sun is still hot, I die." Collected on the 5th day of the week Chash of the month Batab of the year 1171, 10 seconds before death. Subject was a dark-eyed soldier, 31 years of age. Sample is considered questionable. 5 years later. "I'm going to die, aren't I?" Sen asked. The weathered veteran beside Sen turned and inspected him. The veteran wore a full beard, cut short at the sides. The black hairs were starting to give way to gray. "I'm going to die," Sen thought, clutching his spear, the shaft slick with sweat. "I'm going to die. Oh, Stormfather, I'm going to die." "How old are you, son?" the veteran asked. Sen didn't remember the man's name. It was hard to recall anything while watching that other army form lines across the rocky battlefield. That lining up seemed so civil, neat, organized, short spears in the front ranks, long spears and javelins next, archers at the sides. The dark-eyed spearmen wore equipment like Sen's leather jerkin and knee-length skirt with a simple steel cap and marching breastplate. Many of the light eyes had full suits of armor. They sat astride their horses, their honor guards clustering around them with breastplates that gleamed burgundy, deep forest green. Were there shard-bearers among them? Bright Lord Amaram wasn't a shard-bearer. Were any of his men? What if Sen had to fight one? Ordinary men didn't kill shard-bearers. It had happened so infrequently that each occurrence was now legendary. "It's really happening," he thought, with mounting terror. This wasn't a drill in the camp. This wasn't training out in the field swinging sticks. This was real. Facing that fact, his heart pounding like a frightened animal in his chest, his legs unsteady, Sen suddenly realized that he was a coward. He shouldn't have left the herds. He should have never have... "Son," the veteran said, voice firm. "How old are you?" 15, sir." "What's your name?" "Sen, sir." The mountainous, bearded man nodded. "I am Dalet." "Dalet," Sen repeated, still staring out at the other army. There were so many of them, thousands. "I'm going to die, aren't I?" "No," Dalet had a gruff voice. But somehow that was comforting. "Oh, gruff, so you're going to be just fine. Keep your head on straight. Stay with the squad." "But I barely had 3 months training." He swore he could hear faint clangs from the enemy's armor on shields. "I can barely hold this spear, Stormfather. I'm dead. I can't." "Son," Dalet interrupted, soft but firm. He raised a hand and placed it on Sen's shoulder. The rim of Dalet's large, round shield reflected the light from where it hung on his back. "You are going to be fine." "How can you know?" It came out as a plea. "Because, lad, you are in Kaladin Stormblessed's squad." The other soldiers nearby nodded in agreement. Behind them, waves and waves of soldiers were lining up, thousands of them. Sen was right at the front, with Kaladin's squad of about 30 other men. Why had Sen been moved to a new squad at the last moment? It had something to do with camp politics. Why was this squad at the very front where casualties were bound to be the greatest? Small fear spren, like globs of purplish goo, began to climb up from out of the ground and gather at his feet. In a moment of sheer panic, he nearly dropped his spear and scrambled away. Dalet's hand tightened on his shoulder. Looking up into Dalet's confident black eyes, Sen hesitated. "Did you piss before we formed the ranks?" Dalet asked. I didn't have time to." "Go. Now." "Here?" "If you don't, you'll end up with it running down your leg in the battle. It'll distract you, maybe killing you. Do it." Embarrassed, Sen handed Dalet his spear and relieved himself onto the stones. When he finished, he shot glances at those next to him. None of Kaladin's soldiers smirked. They stood ready, steady, spears to their sides, shields on their backs. The enemy army was almost finished. The field between the two forces was bare. Flat, slick rock, remarkably even and smooth, broken only by occasional rock buds. It would have made a good pasture. The warm wind blew in Sen's face, thick with the watery scents of last night's high storm. "Dalit!" a voice said. A man walked up through the ranks carrying a short spear that had 2 leather knife sheaths strapped to the haft. The newcomer was a young man, perhaps 4 years older than Sen's 15, but he was taller by several fingers than even Dalit. He wore the common leathers of a spearman, but under them was a pair of dark trousers. That wasn't supposed to be allowed. His black Alethi hair was shoulder-length and wavy, his eyes a dark brown. He also had knots of white cord on the shoulders of his jerkin, marking him as a squad leader. The 30 men around Sen snapped to attention, raising their spears in salute. "This is Kaladin Stormblessed?" Sen thought incredulously. "This youth?" "Dalit, we're soon going to have a new recruit," Kaladin said. His voice had he had a strong voice. "I need you to—" He trailed off as he noticed Sen. "He found his way here just a few minutes ago, sir," Dalit said with a smile. "I've been getting him ready." "Right. Well done," Kaladin said. "I paid good money to get that boy away from Gar. That man's so incompetent he might as well be fighting for the other side." "What?" Sen thought. "Why would anyone pay to get me?" "What do you think about the field?" Kaladin asked. Several of the other spearmen nearby raised hands to shade from the sun, scanning the rocks. "That dip next to the 2 boulders on the far right?" Dalit asked. Kaladin shook his head. "Footing's too rough."
Perhaps it is. What about the short hill over there? Far enough to avoid the first fall, close enough not to get too far ahead."
Kaladin nodded, though Sen couldn't see what they were looking at. "Looks good."
"The rest of you louds hear that?"
Dalit shouted. The men raised their spears high.
"Keep an eye on that new boy, Dalit."
"Oh, excuse me, my bad. Keep an eye on the new boy, Dalit," Kaladin said. "He won't know the signs."
"Of course,"
Dalit said, smiling. Smiling? How could the man smile? The enemy army was blowing horns. Did they mean they were ready? Even though Sen had just relieved himself, he felt a trickle of urine run down his leg. "Stay firm," Kaladin said, then trotted down the front line to talk to the next squad leader over. Behind Sen and the others, the dozens of ranks were still growing, the archers on the sides prepared to fire.
"Don't you worry, son,"
Dalit said.
"We'll be fine. Squad leader Kaladin is lucky."
The soldier on the other side of Sen nodded. He was a lanky, red-haired Vedan, with darker tan skin than the Alethi. Why was he fighting in an Alethi army? "That's right. Kaladin, he's Stormblessed. Right, sir, he is. We only lost, 1 man this last battle?" "But someone did die?" Sen said. Dalit shrugged.
"People always die. Our squad loses the fewest. You'll see."
Kaladin finished conferring with the other squad leader, then jogged back to his team. Though he carried a short spear meant to be wielded one-handed with a shield in the other hand, his was a hand longer than those held by the other men.
"Are the ready, men?"
Dalit called, unlike the other squad leaders. Kaladin didn't fall into rank, but stood out in front of his squad. The men around Sen shuffled excitedly. The sounds were repeated through the vast army, the stillness giving way before eagerness. Hundreds of feet shuffling, shields slapping, clasps clinking. Kaladin remained motionless, staring down the other army. "Steady, men," he said, without turning. Behind, a light-eyed officer passed on horseback.
"Be ready to fight! I want their blood, men! Fight and kill!"
"Steady," Kaladin had said again, after the man passed. "Be ready to run," Dalit said to Sen. "Run? But we've been training to march in formation. to stay in our line.
Oh, sure, Dalit said. Most of the men don't have much more training than you. Those who can fight well end up getting sent to the Shattered Plains to battle the Parshendi. Kaladin's trying to get us into shape to go there, to fight for the king.
Dalit nodded down the line. Most of these here will break and charge the Light Eyes. I can't figure out who's talking right here. Let's say it's Dalit.
Most of those here will break and charge. The Light Eyes aren't good enough commanders to keep them in formation. So stay with us and run.
Should I have my shield out? Around Kaladin's team, the other ranks were unhooking their shields, but Kaladin's squad left their shields on their backs. Before Dalit could answer, a horn blew from behind.
Go! Dalit said.
Sen didn't have much of a choice. The entire army started moving in a clamor of marching boots. As Dalit had predicted, the steady march did not last long. Some men began yelling, the roar taken up by others. Light Eyes called for them to go run, fight. The line disintegrated. As soon as that happened, Kaladin's squad broke into a dash, running out into the front at full speed. Sen scrambled to keep up, panicked and terrified. The ground wasn't as smooth as it had seemed, and he nearly tripped on a hidden rock bud, vines withdrawn into its shell. He righted himself and kept going, holding his spear in one hand, his shield clapping against his back. The distant army was in motion as well, their soldiers charging down the field. There was no semblance of a battle formation or a careful line. This wasn't anything like the training had claimed it would be. Sen didn't even know who the enemy was. A landlord was encroaching on Bright Lord Amaram's territory, the land owned, ultimately, by High Prince Sadeas. It was a border skirmish, and Sen thought it was with another Alethi princedom. Why were they fighting each other? Perhaps the king would have put a stop to it, but he was on the Shattered Plains, seeking vengeance for the murder of King Gavilar 5 years before. The enemy had a lot of archers. Sen's panic climbed to a peak as the first wave of arrows flew into the air. He stumbled again, itching to take out his shield. But Dalit grabbed his arm and yanked him forward. Hundreds of arrows split the sky, dimming the sun. They arced and fell, dropping like sky eels upon their prey. Amaram's soldiers raised their shields, but not Kaladin's squad. No shields for them. Sen screamed, and the arrows slammed into the middle ranks of Amaram's army behind him. Sen glanced over his shoulder, still running. The arrows fell behind him. Soldiers screamed, arrows broke against the shields, only a few straggling arrows landing anywhere near the front ranks. "Why?" he yelled at Dalit. "How did you know?"
They want the arrows to hit where the men are the most crowded, the large man replied. Where they'll have the greatest chance of finding a body.
Several other groups in the van left their shields lowered, but most ran awkwardly with their shields angled up to the sky, worried about arrows that wouldn't hit them. That slowed them down. That slowed them, and they risked getting trampled by the men behind who were getting hit. Sen itched to raise his shield anyway. It felt so wrong to run without it. The second volley hit, and men screamed in pain. Kaladin's squad barreled toward the enemy soldiers, some of whom were dying to arrows from Amaram's archers. Sen could hear the enemy soldiers bellowing war cries, could make out individual faces. Suddenly, Kaladin's squad pulled to a halt, forming a tight group. They'd reached the small incline that Kaladin and Dalit had chosen earlier. Dalit grabbed Sen and shoved him to the very center of the formation. Kaladin's men lowered spears, pulling out shields as the enemy bore down on them. The charging foe used no careful formation. They didn't keep the ranks of long spears in back and short spears in front. They all just ran forward, yelling in a frenzy. Sen scrambled to get his shield unlatched from his back. Clashing spears rang in the air as squads engaged one another. A group of enemy spearmen rushed up to Kaladin's squad, perhaps coveting the higher ground. The 36 attackers had some cohesion, though they weren't in as tight a formation as Kaladin's squad was. The enemy seemed determined to make up for it in passion. They bellowed and screamed in fury, rushing Kaladin's line. Why do I bother looking when I'm going to lose my spot every single time? Why do I look at my phone? I'm going to lose my spot in the book every single time. They all just ran forward in a frenzy. The 36 attackers had some cohesion, though they weren't as tight. I just read that part too. Rushing Kaladin's line. Kaladin's team held rank, defending Sen as if he were some light eyes, and they were in his honor guard. The two forces met with a crash of metal on wood, shields slamming together. Sen cringed back. It was over in a few eye blinks. The enemy squad pulled back, leaving 2 dead on the stone. Kaladin's team hadn't lost anyone. They held their bristling V formation, though one man stepped back and pulled out a bandage to wrap a thigh wound. The rest of the men closed in to fill the spot. The wounded man was hulking and thick-armed. He cursed, but the wound didn't look bad. He was on his feet in a moment, but didn't return to the place where he had been. Instead, he moved down to one end of the V formation, a more protected spot. The battlefield was chaos. The 2 armies mingled indistinguishably. Sounds of clanging, crunching, and screaming churned in the air. Many of the squads broke apart, members rushing from one encounter to another. They moved like hunters, groups of 3 or 4, seeking lone individuals, then brutally falling on them. Kaladin's team held its ground, engaging only enemy squads that got too close. Was this what a battle really was? Sen's practice had trained him for long ranks of men, shoulder to shoulder, not this frenzied intermixing, this battle pandemonium. Why didn't more hold formation? The real soldiers are all gone, Sen thought, all fighting in a real battle at the Shattered Plains. No wonder Kaladin wants to get his squad there. Spears flashed on all sides. It wasn't difficult to tell friend from foe. Despite the emblems on breastplates and colored paint on shields, the battlefield broke down into hundreds of small groups, like 1,000 different wars happening at the same time. After the first few exchanges, Dalit took Sen by the shoulder and placed him in the rank at the very bottom of the V pattern. Sen, however, was worthless. When Kaladin's team engaged enemy squads, all of his training fled him. It took everything he had to just remain there, holding his spear outward and trying to look threatening. For the better part of an hour, Kaladin's squad held their small hill, working as a team, shoulder to shoulder. Kaladin often left his position at the front, rushing this way and that, banging his spear on his shield in a strange rhythm. Those are signals, Sen realized, as Kaladin's squad moved from the V shape into a ring. With the screams of the dying and the thousands of men calling to others, it was nearly impossible to hear a single person's voice, but the sharp clang of the spear against the metal plate on Kaladin's shield was clear. Each time they changed formations, Dalit grabbed Sen by the shoulder and steered him. Kaladin's team didn't chase down stragglers. They remained on the defensive, and while several of the men in Kaladin's team took wounds, none of them fell. Their squad was too intimidating for the smaller groups, and larger enemy units retreated after a few exchanges, seeking easier foes. Eventually, something changed. Kaladin turned, watching the tides of the battle with discerning brown eyes. He raised his spear and smacked his shield in a quick rhythm he hadn't used before. Dalit grabbed Sen by the arm and pulled him away from the small hill. Why abandon it now? Just then, the larger body of Amaram's force broke, the men scattering. Sen hadn't realized how poorly the battle in this quarter had been going for his side. As Kaladin's team retreated, they passed many wounded and dying, and Sen grew nauseated. Soldiers were sliced open. their insides spilling out. He didn't have time for the horror. The retreat quickly turned into a rout. Dalit cursed, and Kaladin beat his shield again, the squad changing direction, heading eastward. There, Sen saw a large group of Amaram's soldiers was holding, but the enemy had seen the ranks break, and that made them bold. They rushed forward in clusters like wild axe hounds hunting stray dogs. Before Kaladin's team was halfway across the field of the dead and dying, a large group of enemy soldiers intercepted them. Kaladin reluctantly banged his shield. His squad slowed. Sen felt his heart begin to thump faster and faster. Nearby, a squad of Amaram's soldiers were consumed. Men stumbled and fell, screaming, trying to get away. The enemies used their spears like skewers, killing men on the ground like kreblings. Kaladin's men met the enemy in a crash of spears and shields. Bodies on all sides, and Sen was spun out. In the jumble of friend and foe, dying and killing, Sen grew overwhelmed. So many men running in so many directions. He panicked, scrambling for safety. A group of soldiers nearby wore Elethi uniforms and Kaladin's squad. Sen ran for them, but when some turned toward him, Sen was terrified to realize that he didn't recognize them. This wasn't Kaladin's squad, but a small group of unfamiliar soldiers holding an uneven, broken line, wounded and terrified. They scattered as soon as an enemy squad got close. Sen froze, holding his spear in a sweaty hand. The enemy soldiers charged right for him. His instincts urged him to flee, yet he had seen so many men picked off one at a time. He had to stand. He had to face them. He couldn't run. He couldn't. He yelled, stabbing his spear at the lead soldier, the man casually knocking the weapon aside with his shield, then drove his short spear into Sen's thigh. The big dang truck. Oh, I should get some water. Any bugs in there? I lost my lid. Heavens to Betsy. Sen is screwed. Sen froze, holding his spear in a sweaty hand. Did I just read that? He couldn't run. He yelled, stabbing his spear at least. Oh, yeah. The pain. Sen got stabbed in the thigh. The pain was hot, so hot, that the blood squirting out on his leg felt cold by comparison. Sen gasped. The soldier yanked the weapon free. Sen stumbled backward, dropping his spear and shield. He fell to the rocky ground, splashing in someone else's blood. His foe raised a spear high, a looming silhouette against the stark blue sky, ready to ram it into Sen's heart. Excusez-moi. And then he was there. You on camera? I should read them on camera. I don't know what that means. The pain was so hot. Oh my gosh. And then he was there. I need to stop looking at the screen. I get distracted. I lose my spot. Squad leader, storm blessed. Kaladin's spear came as if out of nowhere, narrowly deflecting the blow that was to have killed Sen. Kaladin set himself in front of Sen, alone, facing down 6 spearmen. He didn't flinch. He charged. It happened so quickly. Kaladin swept the feet from beneath the man who had stabbed Sen. Even as that man fell, Kaladin reached up and flipped a knife from one of the sheaths, tied down about his spear. His hand snapped, knife flashing and hitting the thigh of a second foe. That man fell to one knee, screaming. A third man froze, looking at his fallen allies. Kaladin shoved past a wounded enemy and slammed his spear into the gut of the third man. A fourth man fell with a knife to the eye. When had Kaladin grabbed that knife? He spun between the last two, his spear a blur, wielding it like a quarterstaff. For a moment, Sen thought he could see something surrounding the squad leader. A warping of the air, like the wind itself, become visible. I've lost a lot of blood. It's flowing out so quickly. Kaladin spun, knocking aside attacks, and the last two spearmen fell with gurgles that Sen thought sounded surprised. Foes, all down. Kaladin turned, knelt beside Sen. The squad leader set aside his spear and whipped a white strip of cloth from his pocket. Then, efficiently, wrapped it tight around Sen's leg. Kaladin worked with the ease of one who had bound wounds dozens of times before. "Kaladin, sir," Sen said, pointing at one of the soldiers Kaladin had wounded. The enemy man held his leg as he stumbled to his feet. In a second, however, Mountainous Dalet was there, shoving the foe with his shield. Dalet didn't kill the wounded man, but let him stumble away unarmed. The rest of the squad arrived and formed a ring around Kaladin, Dalet, and Sen. Kaladin stood up, raising his spear to his shoulder. Dalet handed him back his knives, retrieved from the fallen foes.
"Had me worried there, sir," Dalet said. "Running off like that."
"I knew that you would follow," Kaladin said. "Raise the red banner, Sen. Curator, you're going back with the boy. Dalet, you, right here. Amoram's line is bulging in this direction. We should be safe soon."
"And you, sir?"
Dalet asked. Kaladin looked across the field. A pocket had opened in the enemy forces, and a man rode there on a white horse, swinging about him with a wicked mace. He wore full-plate armor, polished and gleaming silver. "A shard-bearer," Sen said. Dalet snorted. "No, thank the Stormfather. Just a light-eyed officer. Shard-bearers are far too valuable to waste on a minor border dispute." Kaladin watched the light eyes with a seething hatred. It was the same hatred Sen's father had shown when he had spoken of Chol rustlers, or the hatred Sen's mother would display when someone mentioned Kusiri, who had run off with the cobbler's son.
"Sir?"
Dalet said hesitantly. "Sub-squads 2 and 3, pincer pattern," Kaladin said, his voice hard. "We're taking a Bright Lord off his throne." "You sure that's wise, sir? We've got wounded." Kaladin turned toward Dalet. "That's one of Hollow's officers. He might be the one." "You don't know that, sir." "Regardless, he's a battalion lord. If we kill an officer that high, we're all but guaranteed to be in the next group sent to the Shattered Plains. We are taking him." His eyes grew distant. "Imagine it, Dalet. Real soldiers. A war camp with discipline and light eyes with integrity. A place where our fighting will mean something." Dalet sighed, but nodded. Kaladin waved to a group of his soldiers, then they raced across the field. A small group of soldiers, including Dalet, waiting behind with the wounded. One of those, a thin man with black Alethi hair speckled with a handful of blonde hairs, marking some foreign blood, pulled a long red ribbon from his pocket and attached it to his spear. He held the spear aloft, letting the ribbon flap in the wind.
"It's a call for runners to carry out the wounded off of the field," Dalet said to Sen. "We'll have you out of here soon. You were brave, standing against those 6.
"Fleeing seemed stupid," Sen said, trying to take his mind off of his throbbing leg. "With so many wounded on the field, how can we think that the runners will come for us?"
"Squad leader Kaladin bribes them," Dalet said. "They usually only carry off the light eyes, but there are more runners than there are wounded light eyes. The squad leader puts most of his pay into the bribes."
"This squad is different," Sen said, feeling lightheaded.
"I told you."
"Well, not because of luck. It's because of training."
"That's part of it. Part of it is because we know if we get hurt, Kaladin will get us off that battlefield.
He paused, looking over his shoulder. As Kaladin had predicted, Amaram's line was surging back, recovering. The mounted enemy Light Eyes from before was energetically laying about with his mace. A group of his honor guard moved to one side, engaging Kaladin's sub-squads. The Light Eyes turned his horse. He wore an open-fronted helm that had sloping sides and a large set of plumes on the top. Sen couldn't make out his eye color, but he knew it would be blue, or green, maybe yellow, or a light gray. He was a bright lord, chosen at birth by the heralds, marked for rule. He impassively regarded those who fought nearby. Then one of Kaladin's knives took him in the right eye. The Bright Lord screamed, falling back off the saddle as Kaladin somehow slipped through the lines, leaped upon him, spear raised. "Aye, it's part training," Dalit said, shaking his head. "But it's mostly him. He fights like a storm. That one, he thinks is twice as fast as other men. The way he moves sometimes." "He bound my leg," Sen said, realizing he was beginning to speak nonsense due to the blood loss. "Why point out the bound leg? It was a simple thing." Dalit just nodded. "He knows a lot about wounds. He can read glyphs, too. He's a strange man for a lowly dark-eyed spearman. Our squad leader is." He turned to Sen. "You should save your strength, son. The squad leader won't be pleased if we lose you, and after what he paid to get you." "Why?" Sen asked. The battlefield was growing quieter, as if many of the dying men had already yelled themselves hoarse. Almost everyone around them was an ally, but Dalit still watching to make sure no enemy soldiers tried to strike at Kaladin's wounded. "Why, Dalit?" Sen repeated, feeling urgent. "Why bring me into his squad? Why me?" Dalit shook his head. "It's just how he is. He hates the thought of young kids like you, barely trained, going to battle. Every now and again, he grabs and brings him into this squad. A good half-dozen of our men were once like you." Dalit's eyes got a far-off look. "I think you all remind him of someone." "Oh, that's Dalit. I think you all remind him of someone." Sen glanced at his leg. Pain spread, like small orange hands with overly long fingers, were crawling around him, reacting to his agony. They began turning away, scurrying in other directions, seeking other wounded. His pain was fading, his leg, his whole body, feeling numb. He leaned back, staring up at the sky. He could hear faint thunder. That was odd. The sky was cloudless. There's a big dang truck over there. Dalit cursed. Sen turned, shocked out of his stupor. Galloping toward them was a massive black horse, bearing a rider in gleaming armor that seemed to radiate light. That armor was seamless, no chain underneath, just smaller plates, incredibly intricate. The figure wore an unornamented full helm, and the plate was gilded. He carried a massive sword in one hand, fully as long as a man was tall. It wasn't a simple, straight sword. It was curved, and the side that wasn't sharp was rigid, like flowing waves. Etchings covered its length. It was beautiful, like a work of art. Sen had never seen a shard-bearer, but he knew immediately what this was. How could he ever have mistaken a simple armored Light Eyes for one of these majestic creatures? Hadn't Dalit claimed there would be no shard-bearers on this battlefield? Dalit scrambled to his feet, calling for the sub-squad to form up. Sen just sat where he was. He couldn't have stood. Not with that leg wound. He felt so lightheaded. How much blood had he lost now? He could barely think. Either way, he couldn't fight. You didn't fight something like this. Sun gleamed against the plate armor. And the gorgeous, intricate, sinuous sword, it was like the Almighty himself had taken form to walk the battlefield. And why would you want to fight the Almighty? Sen closed his eyes. Woo! This thing got freaking battles, man. This book rocks. That was the end of chapter 1. I want to go into chapter 2 because I'm invested. Chapter 2. Honor is dead. 10 orders. We were loved once. Why have you forsaken us, Almighty? Shard of my soul, where have you gone? Collected on the 2nd day of Kakash, year 1171. 5 seconds before death. Subject was a light-eyed woman in her 3rd decade. What the frick is that? All right. 8 months later. Kaladin's stomach growled as he reached through the bars and accepted the bowl of slop. He pulled the small... No, I need a drink break. That's what I need. I need a drink break. Wow! This book's freaking good. And I know it's freaking good. I read it, but that was like 6 years ago. I don't remember Jack Diddley. And I suck at opening this. Okay, what page am I? Oh no, there's no page number. 45. I'm on page 45.
If you don't drink water, your voice gets all dried up and then you start talking like this. And then all the pretty girls look at you funny and they say, "Ew, that guy talks funny. Let's throw rocks at him."
Okay. 8 months later. Kaladin's stomach growled as he reached through the bars and accepted the bowl of slop. He pulled the small bowl, a cup, between the bars, sniffed it, then grimaced as the caged wagon began to roll again. The sludgy gray slop was made from overcooked tallow, grain, and this batch was flecked with crusted bits of yesterday's meal. Revolting though it was all that he would get. He began to eat, legs hanging out between the bars, watching the scenery pass. The other slaves in his cage clutched their bowls protectively, afraid that someone might steal from them. One of them tried to steal Kaladin's food on the first day. He had nearly broken the man's arm. Now everyone left him alone. That suited him just fine. He ate with his fingers careless of the dirt.
Oh, can I adjust this chair a little bit? Get a little comfy as I read.
There we go. He'd stopped noticing dirt months ago. He hated that he had felt some of that same paranoia that the others showed. How could he not? After 8 months of beatings, deprivation, and brutality. He fought down the paranoia. He wouldn't become like them, even if he had given up everything else, even if all had been taken from him, even if there was no longer hope of escape. This one thing he would retain. He was a slave, but he didn't need to think like one. He finished the slop quickly. Nearby, one of the other slaves began to cough weakly. There were 10 slaves in the wagon, all men, scraggly beard and dirty. It was one of 3 wagons in their caravan through the unclaimed hills. The sun blazed reddish-white on the horizon, like the hottest part of the smith's fire. It lit the framing clouds with a spray of color, paint thrown carelessly on canvas. Covered in tall, monotonously green grass, the hills seemed endless. On a nearby mound, a small figure flitted around the plants, dancing like a fluttering insect. The figure was amorphous, vaguely translucent. Windspren were devious spirits who had a penchant for staying where they weren't wanted. He had hoped that this one had gotten bored and left, but as Kaladin tried to toss his wooden bowl aside, he found it stuck.
Hey, Allah, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, everything is horrible, oh no, oh no.
I should have got a heavier shoe. There we go. Stay. Camera. Thank you. Let's see here. Windspread were devious spirits who had a penchant for staying where they weren't wanted. He'd hoped that this one had gotten bored and left, but as Kaladin tried to toss his wooden bowl aside, he found that it stuck to his fingers. The Windspread laughed, zipping by, nothing more than a ribbon of light without form. He cursed, tugging on the bowl. Windspread often played pranks like that. He pried at the bowl, and it eventually came free. Grumbling, he tossed it to one of the other slaves. The man quickly began to lick at the remnants of the slop. "Hey!" a voice whispered. Kaladin looked to the side. A slave with dark skin and matted hair was crawling up to him, timid as if expecting Kaladin to be angry. "You're not like the others." A slave's black eyes glanced upward toward Kaladin's forehead, which bore 3 brands. The first 2 made a glyph pair given to him 8 months ago on his last day in Amaram's army. The third was fresh, given to him by his most recent master, Shash. The last glyph read, "Dangerous." The slave had his hand hidden behind his rags. A knife? No, that was ridiculous. None of these slaves could have hidden a weapon. The leaves hidden in Kaladin's belt were as close as one could get. But old instincts could not be banished easily, so Kaladin watched that hand. "I heard the guards talking," the slave continued, shuffling a little closer. He had a twitch that made him blink too frequently. "You've tried to escape before?"
My dang phone, oh no, oh no, oh no.
Maybe I'll get another shoe. Let's do that. It's not even worth it here. I'm gonna get a shoe. I'm on page 47. I'm gonna get a heavier shoe. This shoe is not heavy enough. I'm gonna get a heavier shoe. You can come with me as I do it. There we go. Oh. A heavier shoe. So smart, I'm gonna get another book and lean my book again. Oh, there we go. That'll do it. There we go. There we go. Okay, I can be loud again. All right. I got my wife's Bible. Because my wife's Bible is heavier than a shoe. I'm going to lean my phone against my wife's Bible and read a fantasy book. My dirty, rotten sinner. Here we go. Here we go. Magic. Magic. Like the fires of oblivion. Magic. Okay. Oh my gosh. Wait, this isn't going to work. What if... Okay. I know, it's the dust on the table. Okay. All I want to do is dance. See my eye wandering? My eye keeps wandering. Alright. Here we go. Frick, where was I? 47? I think it was 47. Here we go. "Are the guards talking?" the slave continued, shuffling a little closer. He had a twitch that made him blink too frequently. "You've tried to escape before?" they said. You have escaped before? Kaladin made no reply. Look, the slave said, moving his hand out from behind his rags and revealing his bowl of slop. It was half full. Take me with you next time, he whispered. I'll give you this. Have my food from now until we get away. Please. As he spoke, he attracted a few hunger spren. They looked like brown flies that flitted around the man's beard, almost too small to see. Kaladin turned away, looking out at the endless hills and their shifting, moving grasses. He nested one arm across the bars and placed his head against it, legs still hanging out. Well? The slave asked. You're an idiot. If you gave me half your food, you'd be too weak to escape if I were to flee. Which I won't. It doesn't work. But 10 times, Kaladin whispered. 10 escape attempts in 8 months, fleeing from 5 different masters. And how many of those worked? Well, I mean, you're still here. 8 months. 8 months as a slave. 8 months of slop and beatings. It might as well have been an eternity. He barely remembered the army anymore. You can't hide as a slave, Kaladin said. Not with that brand on your forehead. Oh, I got away a few times, but they always found me. And then back I went. Once, men had called him lucky, storm-blessed. Those had been lies. If anything, Kaladin had bad luck. Soldiers were a superstitious sort, and though he'd initially resisted it, man, it's too hot to wear this thing. Let me lose my spot again and again. He had initially resisted that way of thinking. It was growing harder and harder. Every person he had ever tried to protect had ended up dead. Time and time again, and now, here he was, in an even worse situation than where he had begun. It was better not to resist. This was his lot. He was resigned to it. There was a certain power in that. A freedom. The freedom of not having to care. The slave eventually realized Kaladin wasn't going to say anything further, and so he retreated, eating his slop. The wagons continued to roll, fields of green extending in all directions. The area around the rattling wagons was bare, however. When he approached, the grass pulled away, each individual stalk withdrawing into a pinprick hole in the stone. After the wagons moved on, the grass timidly poked back out and stretched its blades towards the air. And so, the cages moved along what appeared to be an open rock highway, cleared just for them. This far into the unclaimed hills, the high storms were incredibly powerful. The plants had learned to survive. That's what you had to do. Learn to survive. Brace yourself. Weather the storm. Kaladin caught a whiff of another sweaty, unwashed body and heard the sound of shuffling feet. He looked suspiciously. Where the frick did I go? He looked suspiciously to the side, expecting that same slave to be back. It was a different man this time, though. He had a long black beard, stuck with bits of food and snarled with dirt. Kaladin kept his own beard shorter, allowing... Oh my gosh, I forgot about Thalens. Okay, so I'm a little racist to Thalens, and that's okay because they're a fantasy race. You could be racist to things that don't exist. I hate their names. I hate their language. I hate that all of their words have 50 consonants and a single vowel. I hate it. I hate it so much. How the frick do I say this? Allowing the Vlakovs Vlakov mercenaries to hack it down periodically. Like Kaladin, the slave wore the remains of a brown... Oh, so maybe that's not a... I bet... Okay, look, I know that's a Thalen. I'm moving on. Like Kaladin, the slave wore the remains of a brown sack tied with a rag, and he was dark-eyed, of course. Perhaps a deep dark green. Though with dark eyes, it was hard to tell. They all looked brown or black unless you caught them in the right light. The newcomer cringed away. Raising his hands, he had a rash on one hand, the skin just faintly discolored. He'd likely approached because he'd seen Kaladin respond to the other man. The slaves had been frightened of him since the first day, but they were also obviously curious. Kaladin sighed and turned away. The slave hesitantly sat down. "Mind if I ask how you became a slave, friend? Can't help wondering. We're all wondering." Judging by the accent of the dark hair, the man was Alethi, like Kaladin. Most of the slaves were. Kaladin didn't reply to the question. "Me? I stole a herd of Chul," the man said. He had a raspy voice like sheets of paper rubbing together. "If I'd taken one Chul, they might have just beaten me. But a whole herd, 17 head. He chuckled to himself. Admiring his own audacity. In the far corner of the wagon, someone coughed again. They were a sorry lot, even for slaves. Weak and sickly, underfed. Some, like Kaladin, were repeat runaways, though Kaladin was the only one with a sash brand. They were the most worthless of the worthless caste. Purchased at a steep discount, they were probably being taken for resale in a remote place where men were desperate for labor. There were plenty of small independent cities along the coast of the unclaimed hills, places where Vorin rules governing in the use of slaves. Oh gosh, I can read the sentence. Places where Vorin rules governing the use of slaves were just a distant rumor. Coming this way was dangerous. These lands were ruled by nobody, and by cutting across open land and staying away from established trade routes, Devlakov could easily run afoul of unemployed mercenaries, men who had no honor and no fear of slaughtering a slave master and his slaves in order to steal a few chols and wagons. I'm racist because it's hard to know, man. I don't have a director, I don't have a translator, I don't have anybody tell me what these people sound like, what their names are pronounced like. And just Thalen names suck. They just suck until somebody can tell me how the frick to pronounce Tvlakv. Tvlakv. Could easily run afoul of unemployed mercenaries. Men who had no honor, no fear of slaughtering a slave master and his slaves in order to steal a few chulls and wagons. Men who had no honor. Were there men who had honor? No, Kaladin thought. Honor died 8 months ago. "So?" asked the scraggly bearded man. "What did you do to get made a slave?" Kaladin raised his arm against the bars again. "How did you get caught?" Oh, that's him saying, "How did you get caught?" "Odd thing, that," the man said. Oh, okay. Kaladin is asking him. Okay. Well, how did you get caught? "Odd thing, that," the man said. Kaladin hadn't answered his question, but he had replied. That seemed enough. "It was a woman, of course. Should have known she'd sell me. Shouldn't have stolen the chulls, too. Too slow. Horses would have been much better." The man laughed riotously. "And horses? What do you think me, a madman? If I'd been caught stealing those, I'd have been chained. I'd have been hanged. Chulls, at least. They only earned me a slave's brand, if anything." Kaladin glanced to the side. This man's forehead brand was older than Kaladin's. The skin around the scar faded to white. What was that glyph pair? Sas Morom, Kaladin said. It was the High Lord's district where the man had originally been branded. The man looked up with shock.
Hey, you know the glyphs?
Several of the slaves nearby stirred at this oddity.
You must have an even better story than I had thought, friend.
Kaladin stared out over those grasses blowing in the mild breeze. Whenever the wind picked up, the more sensitive of the grass stalks shrank down into their burrows, leaving the landscape patchy, like the coat of a sickly horse. That windspread was still there, moving between the patches of grass. How long it had been following him? At least a couple of months now. That was downright odd. Maybe it wasn't the same one. They were impossible to tell apart.
Well, the man prodded. Why are you here?
There are many reasons why I'm here, Kaladin said. Failures, crimes, betrayals, probably the same for most every one of us. Around him, several of the men grunted in agreement. One of those grunts was degenerated into a hacking cough. Persistent coughing, a part of Kaladin's mind's thought, accompanied by an excess of phlegm, fevered mumbling at night. Sounds like the grindings.
Well, the talkative man said, perhaps I should ask a different question. Be more specific. That's what my mother always said. Say what you mean. Ask for what you want. What's the story of you getting that first brand of yours?
Kaladin sat, feeling the wagon thump and roll beneath him. I killed a Light Eyes. His unnamed companion whistled again, this time even more appreciative than before.
I am surprised they let you live. Killing the Light Eyes
isn't why Killing the Light Eyes isn't why I was made a slave, Kaladin said. It's the one I didn't kill. That's the problem.
How's that?
Kaladin shook his head and stopped answering the talkative man's questions. The man eventually wandered to the front of the wagon's cage, sat down, staring at his bare feet. Hours later, Kaladin still sat in his place, idly fingering the glyphs on his forehead. This was his life, day in, day out, riding in these cursed wagons. His first brands were healed long ago, but the skin around the Shash brand was red, irritated and crusted with scabs. It throbbed almost like a second heart. It hurt even worse than the burn had when he grabbed the heated handle of a cooking pot as a child. Lessons drilled into Kaladin by his father whispered in the back of his brain, giving the proper way to care for a burn. Apply a salve to prevent infection. Wash once daily. Those memories weren't a comfort. They were an annoyance. He didn't have four-leaf sap or Lister's oil. He didn't even have water for the washing. The parts of the wound that had scabbed over pulled at his skin.
Ow, the freaking neck and gosh.
Okay. We have a pine tree right over there. And it's not our pine tree, it's the neighbor's pine tree. And I hate it. I hate it more than I hate Thalen names. And this was in my foot, and I hate it. I'll throw it behind my back. There. I don't want to throw it in the grass. It's bad karma. Okay. I hurt my foot and now I'm sad. Here we go. Let's see here. I hurt even worse than the burn of just Joe to comfort his annoyance. He didn't have four-leaf sap or Lister's oil. He didn't even have water for the washing. The parts of the wound that had scabbed over pulled at his skin, making his forehead feel tight. He could barely pass a few minutes without scrunching up his brow or irritating the wound. He'd grown accustomed to reaching up and whipping away the streaks of blood and trickled from the cracks. His right forearm was smeared with it. If he'd had a mirror, he could probably have spotted tiny red rot spread gathering around the wound. The sun set in the west, but the wagons kept rolling. Violet Salas peeked over the horizon to the east, seeming hesitant at first, as if making sure the sun had vanished. It was a clear night, and the stars shivered high above. Calm's scar, a swath of deep red stars that stood out vibrantly from the twinkling white ones, was high in the sky this season. That slave who'd been coughing earlier was at it again. His ragged, wet cough. Once again, Kaladin would have been quick to go help, but something within him had changed. So many people he had tried to help were now dead. It seemed to him, irrationally, that the man would be better off without his interference. After failing Tien, then Delet, and his team, and 10 successive groups of slaves, it was hard to find the will to try again. 2 hours passed, first moon. The Vlakov finally called a halt. His 2 brutish mercenaries climbed from their places atop their wagons, then moved to build a small fire. Lanky Taran, the serving boy, tended the chulls. The large crustaceans were nearly as big as wagons themselves. They settled down, pulling into their shells for the night with clawfuls of grain. Soon, they were nothing more than 3 lumps in the darkness, barely distinguishable from boulders. Excusez-moi. Then, finally, Dvlakov began checking on the slaves one at a time, giving each a ladle of water, making certain his investments were healthy, or at least as healthy as could be expected for this poor lot. Dvlakov started with the first wagon, and Kaladin, still sitting, pushed his fingers into his makeshift belt, checking on the leaves that he had hidden there. They cracked satisfactorily, the stiff, dried husks rough against his skin. He still wasn't certain what he was going to do with them. He'd grabbed them on a whim during one of the sessions, when he'd been allowed out of the wagon to stretch his legs. He doubted anyone else in the caravan knew how to recognize blackbane, narrow leaves on a trefoil prong. So, it hadn't been too much of a risk. I don't know what those words mean either. Absently, he took the leaves out and rubbed them between forefinger and palm. They had to dry before reaching their potency. Why did he carry them? Did he mean to give them to Dvlakov and get revenge, or were they a contingency, to be retained in case things got too bad, too unbearable? Surely I hadn't fallen that far, he thought. It was just more likely his instinct of securing a weapon when he saw one, no matter how unusual. The landscape was dark. Salas was the smallest and dimmest of the moons, and while her violet coloring had inspired countless poets, she didn't do much to help you see your hand in front of your face. "Oh!" a soft feminine voice said. "What's that?" A translucent figure, just a handspan tall, peeked up from over the edge of the floor near Kaladin. She climbed up and into the wagon, as if scaling some high plateau. The wind spren had taken the shape of a young woman. Larger spren could change shapes and sizes, with an angular face and long, flowing hair that faded into mist behind her head. She, Kaladin couldn't help but think of the windspren as a she, was formed of pale blues and whites, and wore a simple flowing white dress of a girlish cut that came down to mid-calf. Like the hair, it faded to mist at the very bottom. Her feet, hands, and face were crisply distinct. She had the hips and the bust of a slender woman. Kaladin frowned at the spirit. Spren were all around. You just ignored them most of the time. But this one was an oddity. An oddity. Why did I say that? An oddity. This one was an oddity. The windspren walked upward, as if climbing an invisible staircase. She reached a height where she could stare at Kaladin's hand. So he closed his fingers around the black leaves. She walked around his fist in a circle, although she glowed like an after-image from looking at the sun. Her form provided no real illumination. She bent down, looking at his hand from different angles, like a child expecting to find a hidden piece of candy.
What is it? Her voice was like a whisper. You can show me. I won't tell anyone. Is it a treasure? Have you cut off a piece of the knight's cloak and tucked it away? Is it the heart of a beetle so tiny yet so powerful? He said nothing, causing the spren to pout. She floated up, hovering, though she had no wings. She looked at him in the eyes. Kaladin, why must you ignore me? Kaladin started. What did you say? She smiled mischievously, then sprang away, her figure blurring into a long white ribbon of blue-white light. She shot between the bars, twisting and warping in the air, like a strip of cloth caught in the wind, and darted beneath the wagon. Storm, you! Kaladin said, leaping to his feet. Spirit! What did you say? Repeat that! Spren didn't use people's names. Spren weren't intelligent. The larger ones, like winged spren or river spren, they could mimic voices and expressions, but they didn't actually think. Did any of you hear that? Kaladin asked, turning to the cage's other occupants. The roof was just high enough to let Kaladin stand. The others were lying back, waiting to get their ladle of water. He got no response beyond a few mutters to be quiet and some coughs from the sick man in the corner. Even Kaladin's friend from earlier ignored him. The man had fallen into a stupor, staring at his feet, wiggling his toes periodically. Maybe they hadn't seen the spren. Many of the larger ones were invisible except to the person that they were tormenting. Kaladin sat back down on the floor of the wagon, hanging his legs outside. The wind spren had said his name, but undoubtedly she just repeated what she had heard before. I've got an itch on my nose. Excusez-moi. None of the men in the cage knew his name. Oh, maybe I'm going mad, Kaladin thought. Seeing things that aren't there. Hearing voices. He took a deep breath, then opened his hand. His grip had cracked and broken the leaves. He'd need to tuck them away to prevent further. Those leaves look very interesting, said the same feminine voice. You like them a lot, don't you? Kaladin jumped, twisting to the side. The wind spren stood in the air just beside his head, white dress rippling in a wind. Kaladin couldn't feel. How do you know my name? He demanded. The wind spren didn't answer. She walked on air over to the bars and poked her head out. Watching Talakov, the slaver, administered drinks to the last few slaves in the first wagon. She looked back at Kaladin. Why don't you fight? You did before. Now you've stopped. What do you care, spirit? She cocked her head. I don't know, she said, as if surprised at herself. But I do. Isn't that odd? It was more than odd. What did he make of a spren that not only used his name, but seemed to remember things that he had done weeks ago? People don't eat leaves, you know, Kaladin, she said, folding translucent arms. Then she cocked her head. Or do you? I can't remember. You're so strange. Stuffing some things into your mouths, leaking other things out, when you don't think anyone else is looking. How do you know my name? He whispered. How do you know it? I know it because it's mine. My parents told it to me. I don't know. Well, I don't either, she said, nodding as if she had just won some grand argument. Fine, he said. Why are you using my name? Because it's polite. And you are impolite. Spren don't know what that means. See, there, she said, pointing at him. Impolite. Kaladin blinked. Well, he was far from where he'd grown up, walking foreign stone, eating foreign food. Perhaps the Spren who lived here were different. Put a freaking V8 in a four-wheeler or something, man. That was crazy. All right, here we go. Eating foreign food. Perhaps the Spren who lived here were different from those back home. So why don't you fight? She asked, flitting down to rest on his legs, looking up at his face. She had no weight that he could feel. I can't fight, he said softly. You did before. He closed his eyes and rested his head forward against the bars. I'm so tired. He didn't mean the physical fatigue, though 8 months eating leftovers had stolen much of the lean strength that he had cultivated while at war. He felt tired, even when he got enough sleep, even on those rare days when he wasn't hungry, cold, or stiff from a beating. He was so tired. You have been tired before. I failed, Spirit, he replied, squeezing his eyes shut. Must you torment me so? They were all dead, Sen and Dalet. And before that, Tux and the Takers, and before that, Tien. Before that, blood on his hands and the corpse of a young girl with pale skin. Some of the slaves nearby muttered, likely thinking that he was mad. Anyone could end up drawing a spren, but he learned early that talking to one was pointless. Was he mad? Perhaps. He should wish for that. Madness was an escape from the pain. Instead, it terrified him. He opened his eyes. Devlakov was finally waddling up to Kaladin's wagon with his bucket of water. The portly, brown-eyed man walked with a very faint limp, the result of a broken leg, perhaps. He was Thalen. Caught it. Frickin' knew it, I remember. And all Thalen men had the same stark white beards, regardless of their age or the color of the hair on their heads, and white eyebrows, and those eyebrows grew very long, and the Thalen wore them pushed back over their ears. That made him appear to have 2 white streaks in his otherwise black hair. His clothing, striped trousers of black and red, with a dark blue sweater that matched the color of his knit cap, had once been fine, but it was now growing ragged. Had he once been something other than a slaver? This life, the casual buying and selling of human flesh, seemed to have an effect on men. It wearied the soul, even if it did fill one's money pouch. Devlakov kept his distance from Kaladin, carrying his oil lantern over to inspect the coughing slave at the front of the cage. Devlakov called to his mercenaries. Bluth, Kaladin didn't know why he'd bothered to learn their names, wandered over. Get away from me, bug. I'm reading a story. The windspren took the form of a white ribbon. Oh, whoa, let me skip a paragraph here. Devlakov kept his distance from Kaladin, carrying his oil lantern over to inspect the coughing slave at the front of the cage. Devlakov called to his mercenaries. Bluth, I just read this part. Okay. Bluth nodded, slab-like face shadowed in the lantern light, and pulled the cudgel free from his belt. All right. I need a drink. I need a drink. I'm getting all wishy-washy and... Oh, no, there goes that lid. I'm littering. La 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 la. All right. The windspren took the form of a white ribbon, then zipped over toward the sick man. She spun and twisted a few times before landing on the floor, becoming a girl again. She leaned in to inspect the man like a curious child. Kaladin turned away and closed his eyes, but he could still hear the coughing. Inside his mind, his father's voice responded. To cure the grinding coughs, said the careful, precise tone, administer 2 handfuls of blood ivy, crushed to a powder, each day. If you don't have that, be certain to give the patient plenty of liquids, preferably with sugar stirred in. As long as the patient stays hydrated, it will most likely survive. He will most likely survive. The disease sounds far worse than it is. Most likely survive. Most likely. These coughs continued. Someone unlatched the cage door. Would they know how to help the man? Such an easy solution. Give him water, and he would live. It didn't matter. Best not to get involved. Men dying on the battlefield, a youthful face so familiar and dear, looking to Kaladin for salvation. A sword wound slicing open the side of a neck. A shard bearer charging through Amaram's ranks. Blood, death, failure, pain. And his father's voice. Can you really leave him, son? Let him die when you could have helped? Storm it. Stop! Kaladin yelled. Kaladin yelled, standing. The other slaves scrambled back. Bluth jumped up, slamming the cage door closed and holding up his cudgel. Devlakov shied behind the mercenary, using him as cover. Kaladin took a deep breath, closing his hand around the leaves and then raising the other to his head. Wiping away a smear of blood, he crossed the small cage, bare feet thumping on the wood. Bluth glared as Kaladin knelt beside the sick man. The flickering light illuminated a long, drawn face and nearly bloodless lips. The man had coughed up phlegm. It was greenish and solid. Kaladin felt the man's neck for swelling, then checked his dark brown eyes. It's called the grinding coughs, Kaladin said. He will live, if you give him an extra ladle of water every 2 hours for 5 days or so. You'll have to force it down his throat. Mix in sugar, if you have any. Bluth scratched at his ample chin, then glanced at the shorter slaver. Pull him out, Devlakov said. The wounded slave awoke as Bluth unlocked the cage. The mercenary waved Kaladin back with his cudgel, and Kaladin reluctantly withdrew. After putting away his cudgel, Bluth grabbed the slave under the arms and dragged him out, all the while trying to keep a nervous eye on Kaladin. Kaladin's last failed escape attempt had involved 20 armed slaves. His master should have executed him for that, but he had claimed Kaladin was intriguing and branded him with shash and sold him for pittance. Hey, beautiful. Oh, that looks yummy. I love you. See you. You have a good time. Tell your mom I say hello and I love her too. All right. Actually, yeah. What time is it? 5:45. 5:45. All right. Sorry. Yeah, Josiah will be here in the next 15 minutes or whatever. Right on. I love you. Yeah, my nephew is coming over, so I'll have to call it quits when he does, and then we're gonna play games and stuff. Here I go. Where did I go? Oh gosh, I lost the frick out of my spot here. Low crack rang in the air. Oh no, don't skip ahead. Master could have executed for that, but he had claimed Kaladin was intriguing, branded him with shash, then sold him for a pittance. There always seemed to be a reason Kaladin survived when those he tried to help died. Some men might have seen that as a blessing, but he saw it as an ironic kind of torment. He'd spent some time under his previous master speaking with a slave from the west, a Saleh man who had spoken of the old magic from their legends, and his ability to curse people. Could that be what was happening to Kaladin? Don't be foolish, he told himself. The cage door snapped back in place, locking. The cages were necessary. Devlakov had to protect his fragile investment from the high storms. The cages had wooden sides that could be pulled up and locked into place during the furious gales. Bluth dragged the slave over to the fire. Beside the unpacked water barrel, Kaladin felt himself relax. There, he told himself. Perhaps it can still help. Perhaps there's a reason to care. Kaladin opened his hand, looked down at the crumbled black leaves in his palm. He didn't need these. Sneaking them into Devlakov's drink would not only be difficult, but pointless. Did he really want the slaver dead? What would that accomplish? A low crack rang in the air, followed by a second one, duller, like someone dropping a bag of grain. Kaladin snapped his head up, looking to where Bluth had deposited the sick slave. The mercenary raised his cudgel one more time and snapped it down, the weapon making a cracking sound as it hit the slave's skull. The slave hadn't uttered a cry of pain or protest. His corpse slumped over in the darkness. Bluth casually picked it up and slung it over his shoulder. "No!" Kaladin yelled, leaping across the cage and slamming his hands against the bars. Devlakov stood warming himself by the fire. "Storm you!" Kaladin screamed. "He could have lived, you bastard!" Devlakov glanced at him. Then, leisurely, the slaver walked over. The slaver walked over, straightening his deep blue knit cap. "He would have gotten you all sick, you see?" His voice was lightly accented, smashing words together, not giving the proper syllables emphasis. Thaylen's always sounded to Kaladin like they were mumbling. "I wouldn't lose an entire wagon for one man." He's past the spreading stage," Kaladin said, slamming his hands against the bars again. "If any of us were going to catch it, we'd have done so by now." "I hope that you don't. I think he was past saving." "I told you otherwise." "And I should believe you, deserter," Devlakov said, amused. "A man with eyes that smolder with hate. You would kill me?" He shrugged. "I care not. So long as you are strong when it is time for sales. You should bless me for saving you from that man's sickness." "I'll bless your Karn. How do I pronounce it? I'll breast you. I'll breast you." Okay. "I'll bless your Karn when I pile it up myself," Kaladin replied. Devlakov smiled, walked past toward the fire. "Keep that fury, deserter, and that strength. You will pay me well on our arrival." Oh, wow, I can't talk. Okay. He's a mumbler. What would a mumbler be like? So be kind of, "Keep that fury, deserter, and that strength. You'll pay me well on our arrival." I don't know what that voice would be. I'm racist towards Thaylens, but I'm curious on what they would sound like. Anyway, Devlakov smiled, walking back towards the fire. "I just read that." "Not if you don't live that long," Kaladin thought. Devlakov always warmed the last of the water with the bucket he used for the slaves. He'd make himself tea from it, hanging it over the fire. If Kaladin made sure that he was watered last, then powdered the leaves and dropped them into the... Kaladin froze, then looked down at his hands. In his haste, he'd forgotten that he had been holding the black bane. He dropped the flakes as he slammed his hands against the bars. Only a few bits stuck to his palms, not enough to be potent. He spun to look backward. The floor of the cage was dirty and covered with grime. If the flakes had fallen there was no way to collect them. The wind gathered suddenly, blowing dust, crumbs, and dirt out of the wagon and into the night. Even in this, Kaladin failed. He sank down, his back to the bars, bowed his head, defeated. That cursed windspread kept darting around him, looking confused. Oh, I forgot about the pictures. Check these out. I can't read any of that, but these are sky eels. Let's look at that. Check that out. And it's all backwards, too, because I don't know how to flip that. But this is freaking cool. And early in the book, they talked about sky eels and how they drop down in the sky and freaking eat your face off or whatever. That's freaking awesome. All right. No, why the frick not? My nephew's not here yet. I'll keep going. Chapter 3. City of Bells. A man stood on a cliffside and watched his homeland fall into dust. The waters surged beneath, so far beneath, and he heard a child crying. They were his own tears, collected on the 4th of Tanatis. Tanates, probably Tanate, I don't know. Year 1171, 30 seconds before death. Subject was a cobbler of some renown. Kharbranth, City of Bells, was not a place that Shallan had ever imagined she would visit. Though she had often... Oh, wow, okay, so we're talking about... No, okay, this is a good place to stop. This is a good place to stop. This is a good place. Chapter 3, easy. Good place to stop. Oh, gosh, I didn't even see all this... Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to me read. I'm happy to read to you. This was very fun.
I'm going to spend some time with my nephew now, and I hope you all had a good time, and I'm happy I could share this with you, happy I could read. Next time I stream, I'm gonna pick up where I left off, chapter 3. We're starting with Shalad now. Awesome. Anyway, I love you guys. I hope you all have a good day. And, Soul Connection, yeah, I know. How do I get out of here? All right, here we go. Finishing. All right. This has been your Amateur Hour on Facebook Live. Have a wonderful time. Have a wonderful day. God bless all of you. Bye-bye.